myself. I'm Angelo Lopez. I am a Filipino American editorial cartoonist, and I have the honor and the pleasure today to speak to Jen Sorensen. Hi, Jen.
Hi, Angelo.
Yeah, and to tell you a little bit about Jen before we talk, Jen does a weekly comic for the Nib and Daily Kos, and she has won the Robert F. Kennedy Journalist Award for Editorial Cartoons, the 2014 Herblock Award, and you were a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in 2017 and stuff. So
that is correct.
yeah. So thank you for taking the time to have a talk with me. So I guess I want to start off immediately by asking, you seem to be a patron saint to a lot of editorial cartoonists who do multi-panel cartoons and stuff. In previous talks I've had with cartoonists, a few of them have mentioned that before you came along, they had a hard time convincing their editors to run a multi-panel editorial cartoons consistently. But after you showed up, it was easier to convince these editors to run multi-panel editorial cartoons, right? So I noticed that a few cartoonists, when they mention your name, they do a sign of the cross and stuff. So
this is all news to me.
Yeah, but I'm wondering, how did you settle on doing multi-panel cartoons, and why do you prefer multi-panel cartoons to single-panel editorial cartoons?
Sure. Well, I'm certainly not the first to do it. I come out of the alt-weekly comics tradition where doing cartoons in multiple panels was the norm. People like Tom Tomorrow, Reuben Bolling, Ted Rall, they all predated me. And Life in Hell, I guess, would be one of the earliest examples of that format that was very influential for me.
That's the Matt Groening one, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so I'm just sort of continuing with that tradition, although it's nice to hear that people, I've opened some doors. Well, what's funny about that is I sort of feel like there was a period where newspapers and more like mainstream publications were moving towards multi-panel political cartoons, sort of post 90s. And then in more recent years, I feel like there's been a shift back to the simpler single panel format. Maybe that's just, it has to do with the decline of daily mainstream papers, and I think it coincides with other factors. But I like the format because it gives me a chance to delve deeper into an issue. I find I often need that setup panel to even introduce the subject I'm talking about in case people haven't heard about it, or, I like, it gives me the freedom to talk about subjects more in depth. And I would find it very difficult to do a single panel cartoon, especially every day. I think, my hat is off to people who can do that and make it interesting and fresh. And there are cartoonists who are really good at it. But I personally, I like having that extra space, to play around with an idea.
Yeah, I envy you because when I was doing stuff for the Philippine News Today, they wouldn't allow me to do multi-panels and stuff just because the space was relatively small and stuff. But I envy that because as a single panel editorial cartoonist, I know that issues are a lot more complex than my single panel cartoon could allow and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the case even with a 4-panel cartoon. I feel like, boy, I'm really having to oversimplify this subject. And you can never say everything you really want to say.
Yeah. Because that's why I envy you and stuff. That's actually one of the reasons I wanted to I admire your cartoons and stuff, is that even though sometimes you have to simplify, you delve deeper into your cartoons than I do in certain issues.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I think your artwork is looking fantastic. I've always loved your style, and you just, I don't know, you just got a great line. And
thank you.
I think you've been doing some very bold work yourself.
Yeah, but it's scary, you know.
It is scary.
Yeah.
It's
So
scary times.
yeah. Yeah, I'm wondering. I read online that when you were in college, you did a term paper on women underground cartoonists. And I'm wondering, who are your cartoonist heroes and influences?
Yeah. So my fourth year of college, I wrote my senior thesis on Twisted Sisters, which was an underground comics collective. Uh, I guess it was founded by Aline Kaminsky Crum and Diane Newman. They put together these fantastic anthologies of women cartoons of the 70s and 80s who did really kind of debaucherous underground comics just about their lives. They were really more biographical than, you know, political, but because they were personal and dealing with stories that hadn't seen the light of day. I mean, they were also highly political and very feminist. So I spent a year really, you know, just reading these comics and, you know, thinking at the time I was going to go to grad school, but then, you know, by the time I was done writing my thesis, I really just wanted to be a cartoonist. And then just finish school, stop writing papers. And Leslie Sternberg, I'll mention, who sadly died a few years ago. She was one of my favorites. She was also from Pennsylvania, where I grew up, and she just had this fantastic kind of hilarious and almost slightly psychedelic style.
Was
Anyway,
she one of
so
the underground cartoonists of the 60s and 70s? Was she part of that?
she was a little more 1980s, like early 80s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, these books came out, I think, in the early 80s is when maybe
Oh,
the
okay.
first one came out. And anyway, so they all had that, a little bit of that, I don't know, it was like post 1960s sensibility, I guess. But anyway, so yeah, so I wrote that thesis, and I think that really pushed me to just give cartooning a try after college and
Yeah.
just see what I could do.
Oh, okay. You know, did you have other heroes as well, or?
Oh yeah. So I guess when I was a kid, you know, like everyone, I mean, I read the daily newspaper comics.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think Charles Schultz, especially looking back now, I mean, Charles Schultz was just so fantastic.
yeah,
Um, so such complicated comics with such simple artwork, you know, like
yeah,
really. And you know, I read a lot of Mad Magazine. I like The Far Side.
yeah.
Um, and I guess as I got older, I started reading like The Village Voice and Robert Crumb, and started getting a little more into that alternative or underground sensibility. You know, Life in Hell, Roz Chast,
Yeah.
and so, you know, I was coming from more of a alt weekly comics background than a more traditional editorial cartoonist background. I think it was only sort of later. In fact, I wasn't even that political when I started drawing comics. It was a little
Okay.
more like Robert Crumb influenced, kind of surrealist
Yeah.
autobio comics.
Uh-huh.
So that's the background I came from. And then it was sort of later that I drifted more towards the political side of things.
Oh, when you read The Village Voice, were you a fan of Pfeiffer?
Oh, you know, I did read Pfeiffer. You know, I was thinking the thing that really sticks out in my mind, just like when I was in college, I would just go up and pick up a copy of The Voice. I remember Stan Mack's Real Life Funnies, which I guess, I don't know how many people even know about it. I think he might still be doing them, but they were just multi-panel comics about people's lives, just people telling him stories about themselves.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that also planted the seed for doing multi-panel comics. And, I'm not sure if Pfeiffer was still in The Voice when I was reading it. He might,
Oh,
yeah.
I
It
never
might have been
really
a
read
little
The
before my
Voice.
time.
Yeah, but when I think of Village Voice cartoonist, he's always the first name
Oh
that pops
yeah,
up in my
no,
head.
he's certainly, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Oh, okay.
I mean, he's definitely synonymous with The Village Voice and
Yeah.
cartoons.
Yeah, but he's more of a 60s guy, right? So
I think he was just a little, I think I hadn't read him. I mean, I was aware of him, but like he wasn't quite as on my radar as other cartoonists at that time.
Okay. You like stuff with an edge, so.
Yeah, a little bit of an
Uh,
edge.
okay. Yeah, I'm curious. Did you get a good grade in your term paper
I did.
or?
Yeah, I actually had a couple great thesis advisors who were very encouraging, and they lent me personal copies of their books. One of them was actually very knowledgeable about, she was a cartoon fan, and so she actually broadened my horizons a little bit, introduced me to some new material.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So, okay. Well, I'm curious. This is a question of craft. Okay.
Mhm.
How do you do your cartoons? Do you do pen and papers or do you do mostly in computer? And what's your schedule when you do your cartoons?
Yeah. So for years I just used ink on Bristol board. But I guess maybe it was like 2019, I finally decided to get an iPad and draw digitally, try and save
Yeah.
some time. I mean, they take forever to draw. I mean, they look simple. They just take forever.
Uh,
And so nowadays, I write out scripts and ideas on paper. I don't do that digitally. Ideally, so my deadline is basically early Tuesday morning or Monday night, late Monday night.
okay.
And so I basically, ideally, I've started writing the cartoon a few days before Monday, and I have some idea of what I'm doing, or I have a partial script in place. But often I just wind up working all day on Monday and staying up late. I mean, it's just Monday is like the day that cartoon gets done.
Is that the day when you
I
have a lot of coffee or?
I have a lot of coffee. I tune out of social media completely. I just I find that just working in one big long session is just it's sort of how I do it. But I mean, I think that the strip comes out better if I've been working on it for a while before. It's nice to have time to edit. And part of the process on Monday, I think part of what makes it very time consuming is that I'm editing just up until the last minute. I'm finding ways to simplify the text, ways to because it's sort of a winnowing down process with these 4-panel cartoons.
Okay.
They start out kind of wordy and complicated, and it's always about making it simpler and easier to read, easier to understand. And so, it's not just like the drawing process is happening. It's, dealing with problems just through the whole process. and until the last minute, so you're sending it out. It's like, okay, I think it's probably good enough now.
Yeah. You're mentioning that and stuff. Whenever I've tried to do multi-panel cartoons,
Mhm.
my dialogue is terrible and stuff. Whenever I read my dialogue, I keep thinking, I wouldn't want to have a conversation with a person who speaks this way. So I admire your dialogue and stuff. How do you create such kind of natural sounding dialogue in your cartoons? Is it just, I don't know.
Thank you. I have found that it's all about keeping it as short and simple as possible. And I start out writing very unwieldy sentences, and it's sort of a matter of getting the point across as quickly as possible. And so I try not to make the dialogue too complicated or too long-winded.
Oh.
I also find something I've picked up, I think, more in recent years is that there is kind of a rhythm to these comics. It's almost like writing a song where you're crafting like pacing. And people really respond to pacing and timing. Comic timing is important. And so I think that's something I've been paying a little more attention to in recent years.
Yeah. When you say pacing, sort of like a comedian's timing, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
When a stand-up comic is saying something, the way they say a line and their timing in saying a line has a big effect on whether you get a laugh or not. Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly. There's like setup, and then delivery. Although, I mean, in some cases, my cartoons don't necessarily follow that format, but it's keeping things punchy. Yeah, and then maybe separating, if you need to separate text into two different dialogue balloons, you know, put them in separate parts of the panel. Sometimes that can impact the pacing. And
you know, I didn't think of that and stuff. Whenever I've always tried to put my dialogue all in one balloon so it looks kind of wordy and stuff. So, okay. I didn't realize that breaking up the balloons.
Break it up.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, yeah. So, okay. Would you use when you said you bought an iPad, is it Procreate that you're using?
Yeah, I'm using Procreate. So I do, yeah, I mean, I do the pencils and inking in Procreate. I have a little template, for different numbers of panels. So I have like a 4-panel template, 6-panel template that I created for my strip. And then, so depending on how many panels it is, I just, I use that template. And then once I've inked it, I actually import it into Photoshop on my laptop, and I add the text, which is a font that I created with my own handwriting. And
okay.
I find like I need to do that in Photoshop. Maybe it's possible to do that in Procreate now, but I just, it's much easier to do it on a laptop. And then I also color it in Photoshop as well, because I still need to do like CMYK colors for newspapers and halftones for the black and white version. So all that is much easier in Photoshop.
Okay. When you used to do just Bristol board and stuff, did you use Zipatone or?
In the very earliest days, I did. Yeah.
Okay.
But that was around maybe 1999, 2000. And I think once I got Photoshop and I learned how to do that in Photoshop, I switched to that pretty quickly.
Yeah, because a few cartoonists have told me, most cartoonists that I've talked to who use Zipatone, they hated it and stuff.
It was sticky, and like little bits of it would get everywhere on your desk, on your fingers. There'd be little dots everywhere. I mean, it was kind of cool. You'd wind up with very cool looking original artwork.
Oh, you do? Yeah, but do you ever exhibit your work? I'm curious, because if you use mostly the computer, is your stuff ever in a gallery?
I've had various shows request artwork, and I've sent usually, well, I mean, for the most part, I've had an original to send, although it's been sort of incomplete, and I would usually send it with like a print. Ideally you send it with like the finished print, so you see how it looks, once it's had, color added. I mean, I was doing hand lettering until probably 2019 as well.
Yeah, because I was wondering about that. You'd always have an incomplete art, right, and stuff. How would you, if somebody requested that you have a show and stuff, how would you exhibit it?
So nowadays, so back then, I mean, they were like complete enough that you could see the original artwork and you could see the lettering, and maybe there's some things were missing, like a few elements like panel borders. But since then, I would just, I guess I haven't done too much since I switched to digital, but I would have to send a print, I think. I mean, I think it's just all digital now, so I guess that's what I would do. Yeah.
Yeah, Ed Hall, do you know him? He does. Yeah, he does. He used to do original artwork, but then he says he's in a gallery that shows his cartoons. But if he does, but now he switched to computer, and I was wondering about that and stuff. Do people still buy prints if it's not the original stuff? And I guess and I was always wondering about that, because I mean, nobody's ever asked if I can show my work in a gallery and stuff, but if they ever did, I was always curious to how would you do that and stuff. So
yeah, I mean, I used to sell prints, and so I guess that's a separate thing. That got to be a little too much of a pain, and now I'm finding the post office is too unreliable, and it's just too many complications. But in those cases, like I make a really nice high quality print, color print, sign it, sometimes write a message to people. And so I mean, those actually look really good. And in fact, I don't have a problem with that showing up in a gallery, because that's just kind of like what the finished work looks like. Although, I share your love for original art and looking at, originals.
Yeah.
In the Library of Congress, they've got some great stuff.
Yeah. When I finally won the RFK award, they took me on a tour, and I saw some original Pogo, some
Oh yeah, yeah.
original, and I thought, oh my gosh, yeah, and stuff. Yeah, one of these days I got to go to the Billy Ireland Museum and stuff. So,
Oh yeah, no, they have great stuff there too. Yeah, it's a wonderful facility.
oh, okay, okay, yeah. I'm curious. You did a interview a long time, a while ago, where you talked about how you majored in anthropology,
Mhm.
right? Is that right? And stuff.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Now, I've noticed in some of your cartoons, you go underneath the surface of political issues and stuff,
Mhm.
and you try to look at the cycles that seem to reoccur with certain political issues and stuff. You- an example, you and I, we participated in a talk with Kevin Gallagher, and you showed um, a cartoon where you looked at the phases that this country seems to always go through when on the run up to a war and stuff. I love that. It's a
Mhm.
wonderful cartoon and stuff. But I'm wondering, did your study of anthropology have an influence on your cartooning?
Yeah, I would say that there's a lot of overlap between cultural anthropology and cartooning, in that both are about observing society from maybe a little bit of a remove, like you're kind of studying things from the outside and trying to understand how things work. Um, just understanding why are people doing this? Why, and not necessarily assuming that anything is just necessarily normal or the way things should be. Um, and so I guess I've always enjoyed that aspect of just kind of watching people and trying to understand what was going on. And so I think that also informs my interest in doing cartoons about social issues and the underlying ideologies that are at play. And in some ways, I feel like, especially these days, that is almost more important than satirizing political figures, which
Yeah,
I still do from time to time, but I'm more intellectually interested in just understanding like the ideas and the subtext of what's really going on with these, I don't know, like far right narratives and how the mainstream media is being influenced to maybe frame issues in these ways, and recognizing where that framing has gone wrong, and just buying into certain language that's
yeah,
favoring the right. Or anyway, so that's the sort of thing that interests me. It's kind of like decoding these ideas that we sort of take for granted.
yeah, yeah. That's what I like about your cartoons too, because whenever I read a lot of your cartoons, I always feel like I'm learning something new because you kind of delve into your cartoons are very thoughtful. They have certain insights and stuff, and I think it's easy to just make fun of a political figure, but it's a lot harder to try to figure out the um, what does the other side believe, and what's because it seems like your cartoons are always kind of like examining what is um what is their argument, and then you try to kind of deconstruct that argument and stuff, and
Exactly.
yeah, the fallacies and stuff. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, thank you. At least that's what a successful at its best, that's what I try to achieve. Some weeks it's a little harder than others. But
Yeah,
yeah, I feel like just maybe drawing, lampooning political figures is important, but I guess if you've done this long enough, it's just kind of like new players just come along and replace the old players, while
yeah,
the ideas remain the same or even get worse and worse. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess from a purely electoral standpoint, it's, making fun of people has some use value, but at a certain point, you just feel like you're normalizing this process. Or at least I feel like if I'm doing too much just headline news about politicians, I'm just kind of bringing them into what used to be like a normal democratic process and like folding them into political cartoons,
yeah,
in a way, just normalizing them. And so
yeah,
I don't know. I think a lot about that these days, and I feel a little uncomfortable just straight up satire, like I try not to draw Trump anymore if I can help it. Even though people like my Trump, but I
Were
don't.
you doing a lot of them in the beginning, I guess, or
Yeah, kind of. I guess I was. I mean, they made it so easy, you know, there was just like so
Yeah.
much material there. But I think as time wore on, I don't know, it just felt kind of cheaper and cheaper.
And
I
isn't it?
really hope I don't have to draw them again.
Yeah, yeah. Well, isn't it like I'm in a week, or at least I was in a weekly and stuff in my, the Philippine News Today, the paper I was working
Yeah,
with.
what happened there? You were in there for a long time.
Yeah, what happened was they had I got a message from them. It's just that they're not earning. They had a new owner and stuff, but it turned out that the paper's not earning much money even with the new owner and stuff. And so
Mm.
because of the budget, they had to drop me and stuff. It was only
Okay.
March and stuff, but it's I'm learning it's not just me and stuff. This has been going on for years and stuff, and I was hoping that I would escape that, but I didn't and stuff. So so now I'm trying to figure out how am I going to still do, because I still want to do cartoons in the Philippine American community and stuff. I just have to
Yeah.
figure out how and stuff. So,
Mm.
but I was doing a weekly, and I'm wondering, part of the thing about a weekly is that when I do, I have to make sure that I try to submit my cartoons on a Friday and they don't get published until Thursday of next week. So in that
Oh,
intervening time, I have to make sure that my cartoon is still relevant a week later
yeah.
and stuff. Now, you said you do a weekly too. Is that do you have a similar concern about that?
Yeah, well, that's one of the benefits of procrastination and working up to the last minute is that my cartoon is published right after I finish it. And so,
Yeah.
often, I mean, things can actually change like the day I'm drawing it and it's too late,
Yeah.
the news breaks so fast. So yeah, I mean, and then, different newspapers will publish it like maybe a few days after the fact. And by then things may have changed. But yeah, in my case, there's a very short lag time
Yeah.
between the time that I finish it and it's basically late Monday night, and then it goes public on Tuesday.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I know with me, when I do political figures, sometimes I don't, I usually try to focus on issues rather than political figures just because I'm not that great in caricature. So, so I don't really want to, but I think a part of it, but during the Duterte, do you know what's been going on in the Philippines with Duterte?
yeah, I mean,
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I started doing Duterte, but I always wanted to do Duterte in terms of how he's threatening democracy. So it's
mhm.
not just a caricature of his personality, it's how he's threatening democracy, how he's pushing for extrajudicial killing. So
Yeah.
I never do a political figure just for the fun of it.
Mhm.
I always try to attack what he represents and stuff. So
Yes. And I mean, I want to say that there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with drawing a political figure or, putting them into a broader message or, in fact, I actually sort of like caricature. So
oh,
I mean, I actually enjoy drawing political figures. It's just, I just, I like to make it a little more complicated than, like
yeah.
you said, than just lampooning, making fun of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so that's a very brave thing you're doing there,
Well,
addressing
well, that's what I
these
hope.
issues.
But one of the things now Ferdinand Marcos's son got elected last year and stuff, but Duterte's daughter's the vice president. So I don't really
Mhm.
think he's gone yet and stuff, because I'm always wondering if he's working behind the scenes and stuff. So yeah, there's 7 minutes left for this first session and stuff.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you one more question, and after that, you mind if we can, it should take around 10 minutes to download, and after that I'll send you another message to come back on the second link and stuff. But
Okay, that's
okay.
fine.
So I'm curious, um you do cartoons that you submit to the Nib, right?
Mhm.
And you were an editor for the website The Fusion, I guess. And both sites feature political cartoons.
Mhm.
Um, um, with the decline in newspapers, do you see these kind of sites like the Nib and Fusion as being the future for American editorial cartoons?
Right. Well, I should mention that Fusion is sadly defunct now. Um,
Okay.
they
Well, okay,
there's
forget fusion. Then is the nib sort of the future for like, American editorial cartoons, or will there always be that kind of economic struggle, I guess?
Yeah, well, the nib is certainly I think probably the best resource on the internet right now for just getting a wide variety of political cartoons and graphic journalism
Yeah.
pieces from artists around the world. I think you can't do any better than the nib. And I mean, they came along. There was sort of a golden age, I would say, in the mid, like, I don't know, 2014 to 2018. There was like this period where I think there was a lot of money and experimenting going into like digital media sites. And so there was like a little flurry, Fusion came about. I got hired as an editor. And so there's, kind of this uptick in funding. And that's how some of these sites got created in the first place. Is there's this little golden age where I think there's more willingness to experiment. And now I think we're kind of in a rough patch, even for digital media. I think some of the traditional funding models are, web advertising is problematic. Social media sites aren't driving traffic like they used to. We know, there's all sorts of problems with Twitter. So even I think that industry is very much in flux right now. And what I'm finding is it really takes a combination of income sources to be a cartoonist full time. I mean, like, I'm very lucky that I'm still in some alt-weekly newspapers, the ones that stayed independent and weren't like parts of a big chain, that was bought up by corporations. So I'm still in like, a number of alt-weeklies around the country. And then, websites like Daily Kos and the Nib, huge, huge part of things that really like helped save my career. And then in recent years, I started my subscription service. So, which is there's a couple ways to do it, either through my website or through Patreon, and that has really made a big difference in just making up for the papers I lost. I mean, it's just a constant struggle. I mean, and like it seems like every year there's this feeling like, oh, is this the year it ends? Is this the year it all falls apart?
Yeah, when I go to when I go to conventions, that's all they ever talk about. Every convention I've ever been to, there's been this sense of dread, right?
Yeah, well, yes. But I mean, I've been feeling like this since, the recession of 2008.
Oh,
somehow I'm still, I don't know, I'm still doing it. And it really is, thanks to readers, readers have been very kind and supportive. And so that's been, a positive, I'd say, of the past few years. And, it goes in waves. It really depends if it's an election cycle or, even that, it's not like just constant, steady growth, although over time it has grown.
Okay.
But anyway, the future is basically like having a variety of little tiny sources of revenue. Lots of little, being very diversified and being supported by readers it's kind of the way. Especially if you're doing what I'm doing. I think.
Yeah, I guess you kind of have to be, because I remember I talked to a cartoonist. He said you kind of have to be tough to be a cartoonist, because you gotta pound the pavement. You gotta know how to be an entrepreneur. You know how to you have to learn how, you have to have the patience to build support, right? Find those readers that love your work enough to help fund you and stuff, right? Sounds like that's what you've learned. You're sort of like you've learned to be a cartoonist businesswoman.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I do find that being organized about money and being frugal and finding new little opportunities and just being patient, really. I mean, honestly, there's just like lots of long stretches where you're just kind of doing your cartoon. And Steve Broadner actually gave me that advice years ago at SPX. I met him. He's really, wonderful illustrator, really nice guy. He was just saying, sometimes it's just nothing's happening and go through these boring stretches and you just keep going. And I've been fortunate that, enough has always happened to keep me going.
Yeah, your stuff is great and stuff,
Thank you.
but yeah, but that's something I have to learn. I've been lazy. Oh, I'm in the Philippine News Today. I should probably do another, have another source for my cartoons, but I was too lazy to look. That
Mhm.
now I have, those skills that you've learned, I'm going to have to learn, and if I want to still do political cartoons and stuff. But yeah, yeah, I don't know Steve Brodner, but I'm in his Facebook page. He's a wonderful,
Oh, he's great.
caricaturist. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Well, welcome back. You know, I have a question and stuff. This is something that it's been bothering me. For the past 6 years, I've been very worried about the threats of democracy, both here in the United States and in the Philippines. But I've talked to a few American and Filipino cartoonists, and they seem very determined to use their editorial cartoons to defend democracy. Do you see a similar purpose with your editorial cartoons?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I feel both scared and grimly determined. I
Yeah.
mean, very worried. I am not seeing, it seems like things are getting more and more extreme and out of control, and I'm not sure I see a mechanism to stop it.
Yeah.
And even though people are very bravely fighting back in all sorts of ways. So, I mean, I feel like the best I can do is try to keep the light on, keep the, just keep making these arguments for democracy and evidence-based reality
Yeah.
and science, and hope that it plants enough seeds to just keep that flame alive. I mean, I'm not terribly optimistic right now. People appreciate it, and I think they need to hear it.
Yeah, I've been kind of encouraged. Yeah, when we go to these conventions, we meet cartoonists from foreign countries.
Yeah, yeah,
And when I listen to a few of them, like I met Zunar, right?
yeah.
I met, and Pedro Molina and stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
when I see and I met some Filipino cartoonists in the Philippines about a year or two ago. And I'm always admiring of their courage because I'm generally not a very courageous person and stuff. I think my political cartoons are more courageous than I am and stuff. you know
I know that feeling. Yeah.
yeah, but I think they inspire me to be more courageous than I actually am because they're in here I don't have a consequence. There's no consequence for me criticizing Trump. There's no consequence for me criticizing Duterte. But I don't know how it's affected my personal relationships and stuff. But I know that in there, Pedro Molina, he had to leave Nicaragua.
Yeah. Yeah.
Zunar, he faced a 40-year prison sentence and stuff. And I kept thinking, but they still do their cartoons and stuff. And I keep thinking like, yeah, I don't know. They encourage me when I don't think, because I don't know if my cartoons have an influence, but I try to act as if it does.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine being in that situation where you are just imminently threatened by what you draw. And I do worry, though, that we are headed in that direction here.
Yeah.
I think that if things don't start going in a different direction, at some point it will become a lot less safe to do what we do.
Yeah.
Or we'd have to, speak through symbols or symbolism, the way cartoonists in various countries have to. I mean, I've judged like a few international cartoon contests, like
Oh, I didn't know that.
like last year, I had the honor of being a judge for the European Cartoon Award as part of the European Press Prize,
Oh,
and which is really cool. I mean, I actually really enjoy seeing this work that I wouldn't necessarily be seeing otherwise. From artists all over the world, many in these authoritarian countries, where they're they have to be very careful what they draw, and so people, they speak in code, or everything's more symbolic and representative, and you have to they can't be very specific. And so, I feel like after a certain amount of just threats of violence and intimidation, which is, it's a growing concern here in America. I mean, we didn't used to have nearly as much just intimidation by audiences of certain, let's say, certain shows and certain news broadcasts. I think that we do run the risk of becoming a little more like these other countries, where cartoons have to be very careful exactly what they say and how they say it.
Yeah, I haven't really faced things on a professional level. I don't think I've really received any, at least not that many comments, attacking my cartoons. But on a personal level, I'm pretty liberal and stuff, but I used to have conservative friends. And over the past maybe 15, 20 years, I lost a lot of those friendships and stuff. So I felt it more on a personal level, but it was more painful than if whereas I'm not scared, I'm just hurt and stuff. I don't know if that's but on a national level, I'm scared and stuff. But on a personal level, I'm just more hurt and stuff because they were former friends, right?
Oh, that would be tough. I'm not sure if I've had that degree of sort of interpersonal hardship. There's obviously, members of my extended family, I guess, who are more conservative than others. Generally speaking, though, I think the main problem for me is just mostly because I'm on progressive websites, in progressive newspapers. I don't, I'd say the vast majority of my reader feedback is pretty polite and positive, and even sometimes when people disagree with me, they're, they do it politely. But I would say there has been an uptick of just slightly, creepier emails, and maybe feedback to another newspaper. It's like that there are people. I think sometimes alt weekly readers that are picking it up in other places. Again, though, I think I'm more insulated than, say, someone who's drawing for a daily newspaper. I'm sure, or someone in a very mainstream publication where they're getting seen by a lot of extreme.
Listening to your comment. Yeah, you listen to your comment. A question just popped up in my head. This is something that just. In the Philippines, women journalists are facing a lot of misogynistic attacks online and stuff. Since Duterte came to power, and I read, I think Ann Telnis in the Washington Post, there was a period a few years ago where she faced a lot of misogynistic attacks over some cartoon she did. I forgot what and stuff. But
yes,
are you seeing that yourself and stuff, or no?
So I think there was maybe a Ted Cruz cartoon where she was on Fox News. And I have been fortunate to not have a controversy like that, where I think I've always been in fact, I just read an account of someone who was glad that Tucker Carlson's show had been taken off of Fox, because every time he was criticized on there, he would receive just a torrent of violent threats and just really intimidating hate mail and phone calls. I think it's just a nightmare for some people who are held up on certain platforms, held up for ridicule. And so I have nothing, thank goodness, nothing to compare with that. Just I'd say the occasional really ugly email is for the most part what has happened.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you haven't gone through that. I don't wish that on you. So
yeah.
But I was just curious because I've been reading about that with some women journalists in the Philippines, and with Anne's experience, and I was wondering if that's more broad based and stuff.
Certainly, I think there's a lot of female journalists and writers in the U.S. who've gone through some very ugly misogyny, and I would say I've been spared the worst of that so
Okay.
far.
Oh no, I don't want that to happen to you. So don't.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, um, I guess this is a related question. A few weeks ago, I talked to a poet and stuff, and in our conversation, I mentioned to the poet that in these highly polarized times, um, I've worried that my cartoons are just preaching to the choir. And when the poet heard that, she responded to me that sometimes the choir needs to be preached and stuff. And I'm
Mhm.
wondering, in these highly polarized times, how do you see your cartoons functioning in that sort of environment?
Well, I want to say I agree with your friend that
Yeah,
I think the choir does need to be preached to
yeah,
sometimes. And I also, I feel like I've actually done some cartoons about this, but even the term polarization, I feel somewhat sanitizes the reality of what's happening in America right now. And I mean, I know it's an easy word for us to use. I mean, it's very handy.
uh-huh,
But I think what is actually happening is one party becoming authoritarian and anti-democratic
yeah,
and attacking certain, minority groups and vulnerable, marginalized people. And so it is not, it is very one-sided. I mean, it is, I mean, yeah, I mean, people on social media get excited about, mostly powerless people on social media might, criticize a tweet or, like,
well,
yeah, like, I mean, there's contentiousness all over, throughout, from every single political perspective on social media. But if you look at who's in power, who has the power, uh, it is you have the radicalization of the GOP in America, and
yeah,
that to me is that's very scary, and I think it's imperative that we speak honestly about it. And I don't think that makes you partisan to acknowledge that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I used to think of before Trump, I used to always hope against hope that my cartoons would, in some sense, persuade and
Mm-hmm.
stuff, right? But ever since uh, when I talked to the poet, I guess I had a new insight, I guess, is that instead of like, let's say, in the Philippines, yeah, I've done a lot of cartoons critical of Duterte, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Duterte's popularity right now is 80% in the Philippines
Wow.
and stuff. And now Marcos's popularity is pretty high too. He won his election 50 something percent to 20% from the opponent and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so these two kind of would-be authoritarians are fairly popular right now in the Philippines. I don't know how popular they are among Filipino Americans and stuff, but I'm kind of worried, and so I don't know and stuff, but I worry that the numbers may be similar and stuff. But you know, when I talked to the poet, she mentioned to me that if you may not be if the 80% of the Duterte supporters may not like my cartoons, maybe my cartoons are for the 20% who don't like Duterte, just to let them know that they're not alone and stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
And I certainly, yeah, I mean, there's a certain segment of the population that I'm not going to persuade,
yeah,
but I do feel like there are a lot of people who are receptive to um, thinking about things in new ways. I think, I'd say my readership really, there's a wide range of ages now. And
oh, okay,
and so I like to think that maybe I'm, giving younger people some things to think about, ways of thinking about the world.
yeah,
Although, I mean, many of them are already pretty sophisticated and pretty smart
yeah,
about these issues. But so it's like there are people who are still, I think, learning about politics. And so I
yeah,
feel like maybe I'm helping them determine their political philosophy. as they are, growing into adulthood. Also, I have a lot of people who read my strip that are older than me, and they all, even they like, I get a lot of positive feedback, from people who, they're still thinking about things, and so it's really not limited to age or anything. But yeah, like you said, people really like feeling like they're not alone. There's someone else going through this, and so it's valuable on that level too. Just making people feel a little better in these horrible times.
Yeah. I think one of the things, because of my single panel and stuff, I have to be more kind of on the attack against certain issues. I think one of the things that with your multi-panel cartoons, you deal with ideals. And you deconstruct ideals and stuff. And maybe that's, I'm always wondering, like, that's an advantage you have, but maybe that's also something that helps you appeal across a wide demographic, is that you're not attacking people so much as you're attacking ideals, and that's easier to digest, maybe.
I do find that people like a well-proven argument. When you can prove it, it's almost like a math problem when you can just sort of logically break something down, and you do it in a really sound and also funny way.
Yeah.
It's like the holy grail, right?
Yeah. You're able to do that, and we can still smile and stuff.
You can't do it every week, but yeah. People like a good smackdown, but I think there's also maybe people who either grew up with like Mad Magazine, I'm finding, or people who grew up reading web comics, who appreciate the longer format, who are maybe a little more open to reading things that are a little more complex.
Yeah.
And so, that, I think that helps too.
Yeah. Do you find because your cartoons deal with ideals, you have a more intellectual audience, maybe because they like, that kind of, engagement with ideas, maybe?
Yeah, actually. In fact, it's kind of amazing. Like, just people who are on my subscriber list, just people doing amazing things. I don't know, astrophysicists and
Oh, you're kidding. Oh, wow.
People like with just lots of people with PhDs. It's not just people with PhDs, but there's like a lot of academics, like really kind of amazing, smart people. I have two writers from the Mary Tyler Moore Show, actually.
Oh, wow.
And just people, it's really flattering. It's one of the few things that really keeps me going. It's just like, man, there's some really smart, interesting people on this list. And I have to keep going, at least to, because I got such a cool audience,
Oh, okay.
And people on Mastodon too. I've joined Mastodon recently, and I'm finding it feels like that's where all the like really smart nerds who are going to save the world, if anyone saves the world, are located. And so I feel like, wow, it's just kind of cool, like meeting people. It's very international. I know a lot of people, I know when we're trying to switch from Twitter to Mastodon, and some people didn't like it because it's a little different from Twitter.
I don't know Mastodon. What's
that? It's pretty heavy on tech people, but also just like climate scientists and like urbanists and bicycle advocates, and I guess it's very it's very LGBTQ friendly. I personally I think it's a really interesting mix of people. But
oh, okay. Do you think it'll survive, or
Yeah, Mastodon. I think there's a pretty solid fan base there of people using Mastodon. Who I don't know that it's going to like completely take over from Twitter, because I think some personality types are drawn to it, and some, I think, prefer something a little more mainstream like Twitter. I guess Blue Sky is just launching now, or Jack Dorsey's alternative to Twitter, which I'm somewhat hopeful will. I think that will draw a bunch of people who maybe want to be on Twitter but don't want to be, but like maybe they don't want to join Mastodon.
Okay.
It's a very interesting time in social media, just things popping up, and
Yeah, I
You know,
feel like an
I
old guy, and the grandpa who doesn't know much about social media. I feel like that sometimes because I don't really
oh
keep up and stuff. But like my friend, some of my cartoonists and artist friends are still trying to persuade me to go on Instagram, and I feel like I'm in arguments that whereas I don't know the cutting edge of social media and stuff, so I'm always learning and stuff. So yeah.
yeah, Instagram. I mean, aside from being owned by Facebook, which I don't like, I feel like that has actually been a really good platform for
Oh,
my work in terms of reaching a larger audience and getting a lot more engagement and feedback than Twitter. I actually think your work would be great on Instagram if you know. I don't know if you can hear my dog. My dog is
oh,
barking in the background.
yeah,
I,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Let me
so
do
you're
let
just,
me let me do my
it's
last.
fine.
Oh
It's
no, no,
fine.
I don't mind at all and stuff
Okay.
because yeah, yeah, I tend to have that effect on dogs.
Well, he can only stay quiet for so long.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Don't worry. I have this cat stuff. Like I say with my mother-in-law, every once in a while the cat scratches on the door wanting
Oh
to come
yeah.
out and
Oh
stuff. And
yeah.
I feel bad. So I let the cat go in my room and stuff. But since I have allergies and stuff, I can only have the cat in for so long and stuff before the allergies start going and stuff.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, because I love the cat and stuff. I don't want the cat to feel lonely. I even let the cat sit in my lap sometimes, which I know is a mistake and stuff. But yeah, but no. Let me do my last question so you have time to be with your dog and stuff.
Oh, no
But
problem.
okay, so this is my last question and stuff. What do you love about editorial cartooning, and why is editorial cartooning important?
So yeah. So at its best, I feel like editorial cartooning can really get at the truth of matter very quickly, very visually, better than like a long column of prose. It's
Yeah.
very immediate, and these days, I feel like that directness is necessary. Not couching things in a lot of language that necessarily softens the point you're making or muddles the point you're making. Another thing that I think is great about cartoons is that you can use imagination or you can do things with that format that you can't necessarily do in other media. Like, yeah, I mean, like video, there's like lots of different creative forms of political commentary now. But you can sort of just you can get kind of surreal and just there's just things you can do with drawings and artwork very easily in the service of making a point that allows a broader perspective than just writing about things in a very dry, rational, logical way.
Oh,
So the combination of just the immediacy, the directness, of a good, clear cartoon with a clear opinion, and then the ability to be creative in ways that maybe you might not be able to do in other formats is
okay.
what I appreciate about it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you, thank you. And since you've been doing cartoons for such a long time and stuff, I guess that's, you know, I'm glad you're doing cartoons and plugging into that and stuff. So, thank you. Thank you. So, okay, well, let me I guess end this right now so that you can get back to your dog and stuff. But